Eli Manning. Now, of course, this weekend they inducted the new Hall of Fame class of 2024, and that was spectacular. Well, the class of 2025, of course, is next year, and one of the biggest names in that class, of course, is Eli Manning. And the question is, Martin, and Rob and I have talked about this a lot on this show. We had Rod Woodson, one of the greatest defensive backs ever, to say that Eli Manning is not a Hall of Famer. So there is some debate on him. Where do you stand on it with Eli as far as him being a Hall of Famer?
If you had asked me the year after he retired, I would have said absolutely not. However, as I've thought about it, put some seasoning on it and put it in the oven, I go back to I forget who was the first person I heard say it, but it's not an unpopular phrase. If you can tell the story of whatever sport without said athlete involved in that story, they're probably not a Hall of Famer.
That's ridiculous.
If you can
that's a little much.
If you can tell
I can tell the story of basketball without talking about Damian Lillard.
Well,
I mean,
honest,
you know what I'm saying?
The Basketball Hall of Fame has a ton of people in it.
Okay, let's say Lillard, though, by any measure, would be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Football, I can tell the story of football, the NFL, without talking about who. I mean, I'm just trying to think of a guy. Rob G jump in, Martin jump in. You know, there's a guy you can tell the story of football. Andre Johnson just got in.
Okay.
He ain't in my story about the NFL. No slight on Andre.
Sure.
But you know what I'm saying? So I know you didn't come up with that saying, so I'm not jumping on you, but I'm just saying that I agree with.
I mean, Andre Johnson still. I mean, I'm not about to sit there and debate
but he
his
ain't
Hall of
getting
Fame
in the
category.
story of football.
But but
you
in
know
the
what I'm
history
saying?
of the game. But the thing is, though, Chris, if in fact that is your margin of in or out, you can't tell the story of NFL football without Eli Manning, because you're telling the story of Tom Brady, who felled him twice. That's Eli Manning in the biggest moment in the biggest game, right? So when you're talking about him in that manner, and he was crazy hot through those playoff runs, and the Hall of Fame, there are people who have Hall of Fame careers, and there are people that have Hall of Fame moments inside of careers that are good enough for them to be able to maintain those Hall of Fame moments. That Eli Manning, to me, falls into the second category. I think I have come to the resignation that he will get in, and so that's why. But you can't tell the story of the NFL Super Bowl history without mentioning Eli Manning, and for that reason, I think he's got to qualify.
Can you tell the story without mentioning David Tyree?
Yeah, but again, David Tyree didn't have the NFL career that
But if your criteria is you can't tell the story, that's what I'm saying. That's bogus. That criteria.
You still have.
I can't tell the story without David Tyree.
You still have to be on a baseline. At the end of the day, Eli Manning was a starting quarterback in the NFL for over 10 years. It's not like he was just out there throwing.
That's a pretty low baseline.
I just don't have the number on top of my head, but I know he played 10, probably 15 years in the league.
He played a ton.
As a starting quarterback.
He played, I think, at least 15.
Yeah, barely ever missed a game. Had the starting streak, he's tough as nails. So all of these things play into the ability, after the fact, right? If David Tyree had been in the NFL for 15 years and had that same helmet catch, we'd be having a different conversation about him too.
I overall, even though I just demolished your criteria, I do tend to agree with you that Eli Manning is a Hall of Famer. He had two remarkable playoff runs. He was only a four-time a Pro Bowler. He never was an All-Pro, ever. Not second team. I mean, I don't even know if they had second team all his years, but he never made All-Pro. He's a 500 quarterback for his career. However, because he did play 15 seasons, he is in the top 10 in passing touchdowns and in passing yards. Now, I don't know how long that'll last because obviously guys are throwing for a lot more yards now.
Long, yeah.
Right. I'm looking at passing yards career right now. Eli is 10th. Okay. And Matthew Stafford's going to pass him this season. But he is 10th right now. And he's only 2,000 behind Aaron Rodgers. So there you have that. Passing touchdowns, Eli is 10th in passing touchdowns too. Mm-hmm. Again, Matthew Stafford should pass him. Russell Wilson, he'd have to have a really good year. Russell Wilson's 32 behind Eli. However, look, he retired, Martin, in the top 10 in passing touchdowns and yards. He's got 2 tremendous runs to the Super Bowl that ended in victory. He beat the 18-0 New England Patriots that, everybody thought they were going to win that game, and they would have gone down as the greatest team ever. And then he beat the Patriots again. So he beat Brady twice. And it is true that his regular season career, he's 500 quarterback. I wouldn't say mediocre, but it was like good, but not great, not Hall of Fame worthy. But when you factor in the 2 championships, and look, I'm not saying this. I'm not saying just because you win 2 Super Bowls, you are in the Hall of Fame. Jim Plunkett won 2 Super Bowls and never made it. It is not a Hall of Famer.
Right.
But he didn't have as good of a career as Eli Manning. And ironically, his record in the regular season was 500 as well. But he never made a Pro Bowl even. So he was not quite what Eli Manning was. And I'm going to throw this in, too, as a factor, Martin. The fact that Eli played New York. And I'm not saying that should be a factor in terms of voters looking at that and saying, you know what, he played New York, let's put him in, or that gives him a few extra points. No, I'm saying during the time when he was winning Super Bowls and in the celebration, the post-celebration, and even the years following, everything done in New York is magnified. Everything. Right? You win in New York, it's magnified and it seems better than ever. You lose in New York, it's magnified. It seems like the worst thing we've ever seen.
To your point, if you polled who has the worst contract in the NFL, I think a lot of people would say Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
And it's not $40 million. Like it's not the worst quarterback contract out there, but a lot of people would say so.
Isaiah Thomas, the GM. A lot of people think he was the worst GM in the history of the league. He wasn't. His draft record was actually really good. But because it was in New York and it didn't work out, it, was magnified. And so I do think that's a factor. If Eli Manning, Martin, does what he did playing for the Seattle Seahawks, is he a Hall of Famer? I think that's a fair question. I'm not saying he definitely wouldn't be, but I definitely think he gets a boost for doing it in New York.
I think so, too. Also, he also gets a boost for being a Manning, right? When you consider that Peyton, he gets a little bit of a boost from that he comes from, quote-unquote, good stock, right, in terms of good quarterbacks. But, yeah, I just think.
And his super, let's face it. And it's interesting, Martin, because when we think of Peyton, Peyton obviously is one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen, like one of the top 5, right? Mm-hmm. When we talk about him and think about him as a 2-time Super Bowl champion, we really, I don't hear people belittling. I never hear it with, but the second one. You might hear it, but it doesn't seem to stick. Well, are you with me on that? I think we just think of Peyton as a 2-time Super Bowl champion, regardless how poorly he played that last season they won it.
Well, part of the reason why it doesn't stick, criticism of that Denver Super Bowl wouldn't stick in the same way, is he didn't even win the MVP of that game, but also he had an incredible, like if he never went to that Super Bowl, he would still be in the Hall of Fame. Right?
Absolutely.
If he never went to that Super Bowl, he would still be considered in the Hall of Fame because what was his biggest problem? Not being able to beat Tom Brady, which is true of almost everybody who played in the AFC the entire time he was there. Right? Like it's true for everybody that they, it's like saying, oh, well, Karl Malone never won a championship, or John Stockton never won a championship. Well, that's because they were playing against Michael Jordan. He wasn't really giving them out. Right? So when that's part of the reason why I think it makes the argument for Eli to be in. Because when you look at why do people not, because the career that Peyton had, he kept bumping his head against Tom. Well, Eli didn't have even close to the regular season career that Peyton Manning had. But when you go up into the biggest moments, he had some big-time Hall of Fame moments. That throw to Manningham, like you said, the catch, the Tyree catch. Those things are just burned into NFL history.
Right. No, I agree. And the fact that his two, like you said, he's a Manning, and his 2 Super Bowl wins were more impressive than Peyton's, especially the second one. Peyton's second one. So I think that does give him a little bit of a boost. So, yeah, we agree. We think he will be a Hall of Famer and is a Hall of Famer.